I wouldn't be above it. I would clean it. It's fine. But anyway, we get then the exit line, which is different depending on the franchise. And this exit line, this week we got from Lolita, and she says, "Recuerden, si no te amas a ti misma, ¿cómo chingados vas a amar a alguien más?" So it's pretty close to the US one. Like,
it's basically a translation. So when Valentina said it last week, I was like, is that going to be our exit line for the entire thing? And then when Lolita repeated it this week, I was like, yeah, it's official. That's our exit line. So I was waiting for something like España or Canada or Italy or France. Each of them have something that is very personal to the gay community in that country. You know, the fact that in España they have the Alaska, not Alaska Thunder, but Alaska Dinarama, the song of like a quien le importa. It's like that's like a big deal there, you know. And so I was expecting something like that. We talked about, before we started the podcast, we talked about how it could have been something like Juan Gabriel's "Lo que se ve no se juzga," you know, like "Lo que se ve no se pregunta," as like, don't ask me if I'm gay, like you're looking at it, you know. Something like that is very personal to our community in Mexico. But we got a translation. But the detail here that is very important is that even though we got a translation, we got to remember that Spanish is a gender language. So we get the A's and the O's. The A's for the women, the O's for the men. And the objects have genders here. You know, the tables are women and the shoes are men. And
La luna, el sol.
Yes, exactly. The moon is a female, the sun is a male. And so the thing with that is that, you know, with the rise of non-binary voices in the community, we have, and also feminist voices, because the crazy thing is that if you have 9 women, a group of 9 women, you refer to them in feminine. But if one man comes along, then
suddenly
the whole thing becomes male, because the plural, the non-gender plural in Spanish is actually gendered to be male.
So I want to say this real quick then too. It was you and I were talking about this a long time ago, and in regards to using, we're going to open up a whole floodgate. Sorry about it.
It's been open.
But this is the place for inclusivity, a place for whatever. So if you hate this, get out. But with the term Latinx, Latinx, whatever you want to say it, however you want to say it, you were the one who told me I want to use it, not just because it's inclusive for like queer people or non-binary or whatever, but it's inclusive toward women. And I was like, how? And that's what you said to me. You were like, well, because like if you have just one guy, then now you're like sort of negating all these women that are in this group by just using the male. Yeah. So that was really eye-opening.
And so, you know, like I said, like it's been a few years since the rise of non-binary voices and feminist voices have been including the letter E as an alternative for not using like a masculine plural for like all of the people, you know?
Well, the other thing I want to, sorry to interrupt, but the other thing I want to say is, ¿Quién me está interrumpiendo, Valentina, from episode one? The other thing I want to say about that real quick is that by also using the E, when people tell me, oh, I don't want to use X, that makes Spanish unconjugatable. You can't speak Spanish if you're using the X. And I was like, okay, then use the E. And then they're like, so is that not your problem with it then? So just say that you hate women.
Yeah.
And just say that.
So basically how it works is that instead of you use it for adjectives, for example, because we have to gender the adjectives, you know, like the flowers are rojas because it has to have the A because it's feminine. And so the carros, the cars are rojos because they're masculine. And so in order to gender adjectives and like nouns and pronouns and articles and stuff like that, which you don't have that problem in English because you only have to worry about, for example, the nouns to be like a they instead of a he or she or something like that. We use the E instead of the A or the O so that it includes everyone who wants to be included. It could include women and men, or it could include cisgender people and non-binary people and trans people and everybody. And so the problem with that is that it is exactly the same kind of a-holes that in the US are against using they as a singular pronoun. Here in Mexico and in Spain and everywhere through like Spanish-speaking countries, people are just being a-holes about using the E to include everyone because it's an affront to the language. And it's like, girl, the language is a mess and it's 1,000-year-old mess. So like it has changed so many times throughout the years. It has changed through our lifetime. So it will continue to change, and it continues to change for the better.
Yeah, we're getting into like some soapbox issues you and I have talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, totally.
But the like language changes all the time, like all the time. And the funny thing is like, how far back do you want to go? I tell people all the time, I said it in a previous episode, our ancestors did not speak Spanish, girl. Like how, you know.
And even the ones who spoke Spanish, like our ancestors from the other side of our ancestry, like the all tiny Spanish from like freaking 1800s or something like that.
Was different.
It was completely different. The letters were completely different, and it was all over the place. So the thing is, I tweeted the first episode that I tweeted that the fact that Valentina was saying bienvenides, it just made, to me, it just made all the difference in the world, because it's like, oh, this is our drag race. Because this is not something, this is not a statement that you can make in an English speaking drag race show. This is a statement that you make. Supreme and everybody else in Drag Race España, they speak like that. But the fact that we get it in Mexico and we get them, you know, for example, Johnny Carmona does the same in
I was going to say, I want to give him his flowers, because he was the first person that I heard really do that on, I mean, on YouTube or whatever, in a show.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a much more fluid way to say that, which how ironic, but like that sounds great. That includes everybody.
The fact that we get, okay, sure, it's a translation of the exit line that RuPaul does, but because this is so specific to us, we're gonna say si no te amas a ti misme, so that we can include everybody,
everyone,
and that we can actually make the statement of, this is Drag Race Mexico, and here we're gonna talk like that, and if you don't agree with it, don't watch the show.
Get out.
Period. Yeah.
So it's interesting, because the other thing that I noticed that relates to all this is when I was watching Veneno, right? There's a character in it who's trans, and when she comes out to her mom, says in English, I don't want to go through this process alone, right? But what really hit me was that she says, no quiero ser este proceso sola, right? And I was like, oh, so immediately in coming out to her mom, she completely has to alter the way she speaks about herself, about, you know, because before that, if she was sort of in the closet about her, you know, transness, then she would have had to have been speaking about her and referring to herself with male pronouns, with the O instead of the A. So it is a huge deal language-wise, I think, in Spanish-speaking countries and other countries that like are Latin-based, speak Latin-based languages, to sort of do that. So yeah, I think that's great. And I'm really glad that even though it's just like kind of a literal translation, it's altered enough with just one letter. And
so it's a battle that we're gonna continue fighting everywhere, because there's gonna be always a-holes that don't wanna do it. And like I said, I always say on Twitter, if you don't wanna use it, don't use it. But you don't have to go the extra mile to forbid people to use it. You know, you know what I mean? Like I get to use it because I want to. If you don't want to use it, that's fine, but you cannot force me, just as I'm not forcing you to use it. You don't have to force me to not use it.
I'm going to say this, and then we can move on.
Yeah.
The energy that gives me of someone who's resisting that so hard is the same exact energy I feel when someone in the United States, and when I say someone, I mean a racist gringo, right, throws a tantrum when they hear Spanish being spoken in public. And it's because they are scared that the country or the state or the city that they live in is going to change so much that they're not going to understand. They're not going to be able to cope. That's what I think that all boils down to. And that's just pure fear, girl. Like, sorry, but times are changing. Anyway,